one. Interview time with Ronald D. Moore. It's interview time with Ronald D. Moore. Who is it interview time with?
Ronald D. Moore.
I think Nick has an erection.
Welcome to Keeping Up with the Cardassians, the proud interviewers of who?
Will Wheaton.
Will Wheaton and who?
The visitor.
And who?
Riddler.
And who?
Armin Shimmerman.
And who?
The Muck Podcast.
And who?
Brian Volkweiss.
And who? Is that it?
Ronald D. Moore.
Ronald D. Moore! Ladies and gentlemen, today we have a very special episode of Keeping Up with the Cardassians. We had the pleasure, we had the joy, we had the excitement, we had the pleasure, we had the...
I already did that one.
We had the pain, we had the fun.
That was not painful.
We had the honor.
There you go.
Of sitting down with Ronald D. Moore.
I see what you did there because you used to write a lot of Klingon.
Yeah. He gave us 45 minutes of his time.
It was a very honorable
He sat down with us for 45 minutes and he talked with us. And we're going to share that with you today. But can I just tell you why this is important? Because he did a little TV show called Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Nice! I thought you were going to say Outlander.
Never heard
For all mankind.
Never heard of it.
He also did Helix.
That's true.
Which was on Sci-Fi.
Carnival.
Carnival. He
Caprica.
Also, Caprica. Oh my gosh, we didn't even talk Caprica. Yeah, I mean, and a little show called.
You know, I've never heard of that.
Now you gotta watch it.
He's a new project he's working on.
Now you gotta watch it.
Oh.
Now you gotta watch it. Hey, we're getting close to watching it.
I mean, we're interviewing people that have created and worked with the show, so...
Look, if we can get Trisha Helfner on as a guest, I think you'd be okay with watching Star Trek Battlestar. I'm losing my mind.
What was that called again?
Star Trek Battlestar.
What a crossover that would be.
Star Trek Battlestar 9.
Deep Battlestar Galactica
First
9,
Contact.
The Next Generation.
I didn't realize Kira, he made that connection. You're going to hear about it. Like, you know.
Spoiler alert, man.
You want to spoil
That's not
a
a big
little bit.
spoiler,
You want to get them.
I just want.
You want to get them amped up.
I'm distracted.
We talk about pizza.
We do talk about pizza.
Real briefly.
We talk about music.
Yeah, that was a very brief, like, he's like, yeah, like, I'm not going to say it, but, I mean, we asked him about pizza, and it was brief, but...
He was the least enthusiastic about pizza. But that's okay. Because you know what he was enthusiastic about? Telling us about his writing.
Yep.
Telling us about the writer's room.
And he's touched a lot of very critically acclaimed sci-fi over the last 30 years.
Yeah. Winner of what awards?
He's a Hugo Award winner. He's a Peabody Award winner. And he's an Emmy Award winner.
This is not your average run-of-the-mill writer.
So we got an Emmy, so we got to get that Oscar for the Tom Hanks guy.
I know.
Yeah.
So trust me, I'm working on Tom Hanks.
And then we're going we're going for the MTV Movie Awards.
On purpose?
Then I want to interview someone who's gotten a Razzie.
A Razzie.
Halle Berry. Make it happen.
John Travolta.
No, I don't want to interview him.
No, I don't want to interview him.
So what do you think will be harder to get? Somebody who's won a Razzie or somebody who's won an Oscar?
Sometimes they've won both.
Yeah.
Halle Berry has won both.
I think some people have a sense of humor about the Razzie.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask Halle Berry, what are you more proud of, the Razzie or the Oscar?
Oh gosh, I'd be curious.
Would you ever don the Catwoman outfit again?
I heard a story about somebody. I want to say who's the popular actress? She's in like a lot of rom-coms with she was in one with Ryan Reynolds, The Proposal.
Rachel McAdams.
No. She's a little
wrong, Rob. You're wrong.
She's a little older than Rachel McAdams.
Sandra Bullock.
I thought I heard it or read a story where she accepted a Razzie in person.
Yes.
Yes, she did.
That I got mad respect for that.
Send her the message.
Mad respect for accepting
Sandra Bullock, America's sweetheart.
Yeah. Hey, it's an award. You got to attend the award show.
Yeah. So, anyways, with all of this said, we have this wonderful, enjoy-filled interview. We should stop talking and go.
You should stop talking. Honestly, I mean,
I couldn't help it. I did my best.
Let's
I did bang a lot on the table,
Yeah, you did.
and my phone kept falling.
Let's get to the interview part where you were a bit more poised and collected and, well, clearer spoken.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back. Enjoy this interview with Ronald.
So real quick, I'll just introduce ourselves. I'm Nick.
I'm Joe.
This is Joe.
And I'm Rob.
Yeah. And we have this podcast here, Keeping Up with the Cardassians. We started that about a year and a half ago.
Yep.
And actually the way it works is he is a diehard Deep Space Nine fan. Diehard. This guy never saw a single episode of Star Trek ever in his entire life until we started this show. And at the time I started this, felt like Deep Space Nine was my least favorite of Star Treks.
Really?
So we all watched it. We're all watching it together. And my opinion has changed drastically because when I watched it, I was a kid. So it changes as you grow.
My opinion's been confirmed.
Yeah. So anyways, that is kind of the beginning of our show, and that's how we got to be. So again, thank you again. So,
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
so. All right. Well, so I'll just go ahead and get started. So first of all, Ron, thank you for being on the show. Do you go by Ron or Ronald?
Ron.
Okay. So thank you for being on the show. We really appreciate it. You have multiple shows out right now, which is why you're such a busy person. For All Mankind is out right now. June 10th is the new season of that.
Yep.
And then Outlander season 7 just went into production, if I recall, in the beginning of April. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. Well, so, we are a Deep Space Nine podcast, but I will fully admit I am a diehard Battlestar Galactica fan. So my first question juxtaposes the two together. And my question for you is, what Deep Space Nine character do you think would really excel in the cast of Battlestar Galactica and vice versa?
Well, Kira would certainly find a happy home aboard the Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah.
Kara is named Kara in part because of Kira. There's very similarities,
okay.
certainly
Yeah.
in the characters and their attitudes and their sort of take no prisoners, sort of rough and tumble of it. I think Adama would have found a happy place in Starfleet. I think he would have easily. Starfleet, I think, speaks to the principles and ideals that Adama held.
Okay.
For the colonial fleet.
Okay. All right. Well, now here's a question for you. If you had to pick between Adama or Cisco as your captain, who would it be?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, they're very different men.
They are very, very different.
Yeah, very different. I mean, I think I would have happily served under either man.
Yeah.
To put it that way. They're different levels of approachability, I think, with the two commanders. I think it's probably, I don't know. I was going to say it's probably easier to have a drink with Adama, but I'm not so sure that that's true because Cisco could relax, and if you started chatting Cisco up about baseball, you could probably have a fun evening with him too.
Yeah, they would get going. Yeah, I feel like Adama would be more likely. If I was having a drink with him, I'd be more likely to end up getting punched by him by the end of the night. I think Cisco.
Yes, there's a good shot of that.
Yeah, I mean, there was a whole episode about that in Battlestar Galactica, a boxing episode. Yeah, so great one.
And Cisco's capable of throwing a punch too. He hit Q, as I recall.
Yeah,
So
yeah, we've seen that. Yeah.
And never heard from again, Q. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, one of the things that I've really noticed about all the works that you've done is the strong female characters you always have. Is this something that's just been a coincidence in the way you write, or is this something that's happened as you've empowered the actors and they've shaped these characters to be that?
I think it kind of grew out of sort of my first year at Star Trek, and I started. I remember when I was working on Yesterday's Enterprise, because that was one of the first things that was handed to me by Michael Piller, was to try to here's this script that exists, and we want to turn it into an episode. Start playing around with how we would do it. And one of the first things I did was turn the captain of the Enterprise C into a woman, which at the time was just kind of an interesting. I realized as a deep Star Trek fan that we just hadn't had any female Starfleet captains at that point, which was kind of crazy. By the point of Next Generation being in its third season, we still had any female, Starfleet captains. And so I just went, well, this would be an interesting thing to just kind of do for the series. And then it worked really well, and there was a good response, and it sort of stuck in the back of my head like this was something that was really still unexplored territory, and you could do a lot of things with female characters that hadn't been done any before. And it was a way to sort of explore changing up expectations and stereotypes. And so I sort of started leaning into that whenever there was an opportunity. Like, well, what if this character was a woman? What if this alien character was a female? And that sort of point of view just kept stuck with me, and I kept playing around with that idea. Like, oh, looking for a different way into a scene or a different way into it. What if you flip the gender roles? You flip the traditional thing is usually a way of mixing up the parameters of the story.
Right. Well, that was what amazed me when I looked at all the shows you have done is the female characters are the ones that by far stand out the most. And typically in science fiction, that's never been the case, right? I mean, it's always been the strong macho man role. And that's what I've particularly been drawn to your work is for that reason alone.
Well, thank you. When it was particularly important when I was doing Battlestar, because I was approaching that project as a term, a lot of things that, okay, so here's where science fiction was, in my opinion, and the frustrations with it and things that I thought could be improved, and let's revisit a lot of things. And the characterization of women was one of them. And how female characters were used and how sex was used in science fiction. It was perfectly fine to dress them up in leather, spandex, and do all kinds of that kind of stuff, but you couldn't have actual sex. Like, there wasn't mature, like, grown-up relationships of sex. And just having a female fighter pilot seemed like a groundbreaking idea at the time, which was kind of crazy because there were actual female fighter pilots who were flying in the Navy and the Marines and in the Air Force at the time, but they weren't being portrayed that much in media, and it seemed kind of crazy that we weren't really playing them in science fiction. So again, it was just sort of like, well, here's stuff that hasn't been done, and why shouldn't we do it?
Right. So when you were crafting shows like Deep Space Nine, and you have a character like Starbuck, and you make the decision to change this character to a female, part of it is not, hey, we're gonna just stick it to the fandom. It's more like, hey, what is compelling stories? What are we gonna do here?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was the decision about Starbuck came out of literally. It was one of the very first thoughts I had when I was approached to do Galactica by David Icke, who became my producing partner and who was an executive at the time. And I went back and I rewatched the original Battlestar Galactica pilot, which I hadn't seen in many, many years. And it was like, wow, okay, there's a lot of interesting stuff here, some good, some bad. But I had sort of forgotten that the center focus of the original series was the Apollo Starbuck relationship. It wasn't starring Adama. Like, he wasn't the lead of the show. It was really about the two fighter pilots. And I was like, oh, that's right. And it was the straight arrow, good son, and his roguish kind of devil-may-care friend, which had been done a million times. And I was just thinking, well, what can I do with that? What do you do with, it's a very stereotypical relationship. They're kind of a cliche genre idea. How do I deal with these two? And it was just like a thought, like, well, what if Starbuck was a woman? And I haven't seen much of the female fighter pilot, and I certainly haven't seen the one that was like the devil-may-care roguish one that would probably sleep with whoever she wanted to sleep with and smoke cigars and play poker and would knock over tables. And I thought, well, that's already an interesting character. And that got me excited about the possibilities of what you could do with Battlestar Galactica if you if you kept the same kind of structure and idea of what it was, but approached it, in a different way.
I think that's what I've always really loved, again, about how you've portrayed your female characters. When you look at certain characters like Kira, or you look at Kara Thrace, like, these are people where I look at them and I go, they could kick my ass, and I'm going to watch out for them. Right. Like, and I love that. Like, I'm scared of them. I don't want to make them angry. And I like characters like that, especially female characters, because for so long it was just men,
especially in that genre in the 90s and early 2000s. And then it started to turn.
Right. And we spoke with, we had Nana on the show a couple months back, and she talked how a lot of the times the studio executives were fighting back against her character being so strong. They wanted her to be the dainty female, and she really had to fight that and really kind of push that to to be the strong character she wanted to be.
Yeah, that's true. And people, and you kind of forget in the midst of time, she was also an ex-terrorist.
Yeah.
That was like, which in the pre 9/11 world was like a very different thing to call a character on television. But on Deep Space, we kind of worked hard to remind the audience periodically that she was an ex-terrorist and she did some pretty nasty things, and that was part of her character. And we didn't want to just gloss over it and shy away from it. So it was like, but that too was a fight, because it was, there's a tendency to at the executive ranks to sort of, well, you're worried about the audience won't like them anymore. God forbid the audience doesn't like them anymore. And come to find that, once you did Sopranos, you found out, well, you can take characters really far. The audience is still going to come back, and they still are invested in them, and they like Tony Soprano to the bitter end.
Right. Yeah.
So likability is one of those buzzwords in TV that drives writers crazy, because you're constantly arguing with people that are like just operating from a place of fear. And if Kara is, if Kara is just not likable, what's going to happen? Oh my God, she has to be daintier, or she has to be more feminine, or don't call her a terrorist, because they're afraid. It's just operating from this place of fear, and the audience is smarter than that, and the audience will go places as long as you tell the story well.
Right.
I think one of the biggest evidence of that is Walter White from Breaking Bad. I mean,
for sure.
Yeah,
it is an absolutely horrible character, horrible person, like in reality, but you cheer for, and you're drawn to this character.
You're invested in him,
right?
You're invested.
Yeah.
You like this character, and it's like you wouldn't like that person in real life. So that the
No.
audience will like somebody as long as the story is told well. Like you said.
Yeah.
Right. It's
That's
kind of like
absolutely
that.
true.
It's kind of like that dirty hockey player that's on the opposing team, but when they're on your team, you love that hockey player. But when they're somewhere else, you can't stand them.
That's right.
It's the same thing with these characters. If you develop this attachment to them, it's a reason why we think Gul Dukat is a dirtbag, but you do love Kira, right? Kira has killed a lot of innocent people, but you love her. Gul Dukat has done the same thing, but we hate him.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Do we?
Do we?
Do we hate him? I don't
Do
know. Maybe a little bit. I don't know.
We're in season 6 right now. So Joe just actually watched Far Beyond the Stars. So he just got
Oh, wow.
to the point where Dukat kind of went the other way completely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they duped me. I got duped.
We had him believing that Gul Dukat had a soft spot to him, but we let him down.
Yeah,
so,
we lied to him.
So one of the questions I have, a friend actually sent this to me, and I think it's such a funny question that I have to ask it for you. It says, it strikes me that your 3 most prominent works are a show set in the future, a show set in the past, and a futuristic show that is, spoiler alert, in fact, set in the past. What do you have against the present?
I'm not that interested in telling stories in the present, to be honest. It's just I really enjoy world building. I really enjoy building a world that does not exist for the audience, that takes them away from their day-to-day life. And here, whether it's the past or the future, it's an alternate reality, or it's some science fiction thing. I just enjoy that process of coming up with the rules of this other world, what the history of this other world is, what's its mythology, what's its culture, what are its social mores, and using that as a lens to sort of look at our own culture. I really enjoy that. So I guess pieces that are more about our actual lives and what we're really going through, I prefer to tell in another setting. I just prefer the metaphor of it all. And I am just not that interested in today.
Well, that kind of goes into, you were an original series fan, if I remember correctly, and how especially them and Next Generation and a little bit of Deep Space Nine used to tell those narratives without hitting you in the face with it, whether it be the guy that was black and white on one side or white and black on the other side, and the racism that could come from that. So it kind of, maybe that was the genesis of your love for doing that.
Oh, I think it absolutely was. I mean, I was a deep, deep fan of the original series growing up as a kid in the 70s, when it was in 5 days a week in strip run syndication, and I just lived and breathed it, and could quote into almost entire episodes, and bought the technical manuals and anything I could get my hands on. And that style of storytelling, of using it to, using science fiction as a metaphor for our society, and calling them the Klingons instead of the Soviets. And, I really responded to that. I thought it was interesting, and it was a way of lowering the audience's, sort of barriers and defense mechanisms. Because as soon as you start telling a story that's about Republicans and Democrats, everybody retreats to their corners,
Exactly. Yeah.
And when you can take those names and labels off of things and talk about Klingons and Vulcans or Cylons, the audience kind of gives you a pass, and they're willing to kind of enjoy the drama, and hopefully they can think about the deeper issues and themes that you're exploring without having to get defensive because those people are telling me not to think the way that I think, and I won't be lectured to, and so on. And it's just a more interesting way, I think, of reaching people and making them think.
Well, and we've even noticed that as we're watching through Deep Space Nine, one of the things that we joke around constantly is about O'Brien, about how he is a racist. Like he is constantly calling out Cardassians and making fun of them, and
Cardis.
He calls them Cardis or spoonheads, and he's constantly saying these things, and to me, that's like that subtle racism that exists, that people will say, well, I'm not a racist, and then they say these things and you go, well, wait a minute, you kind of are a little bit. And then so O'Brien's that guy. We still love him, but we can recognize the flaws in him, and it keeps it so we're not trying to attach it to the real world here. We're not saying, oh gosh, Star Trek is being so heavy-handed and throwing this at us. So it makes you appreciate it that much more.
Yeah. So obviously you're drawn to projects that kind of you can world build. There's a lot of people who are interested in your writing style. Like, how do you approach a script or a story when you're going into it with fresh eyes?
Each story is unique and each episode is unique, and in a certain sense, every scene is. So you're just trying to get to a place, I guess is how I think of it. There's a goal when I'm sitting down and writing a script, whether it's the pilot or it's an episode. I know that by the end of this story, I need to get over here. I need to move these characters from here to here, and I need to move the plot from here to here. So then it's about the journey that you're taking, right? Mm-hmm. And trying to, I'm always sort of playing with reveals. If you look at my writing closely, it's Michael Reimer once pointed that out to me from Battlestar, that, you work really hard on the reveal. I was like, yeah, well, that's true. Because I find reveals another way of saying surprise. Yeah. And there's surprises within scenes, there's surprises within stories, there's surprises just within lines of dialogue. And the audience likes to be surprised. So I'm always looking for the surprise throughout the script. I'm always looking for a way, how am I going to introduce this concept? What's the best way to misdirect the audience? Right. The audience, the best thing, in my opinion, is to make the audience think that they're going down this path. Oh, I know television, I know stories. We're going down this path we've gone down 1,000 times. And then you get them comfortable with that feeling, and then you change the game, and they suddenly realize, holy shit, we're not going down that path. We're going down this path this whole time, and I didn't realize. And then the audience is kind of excited and kind of pleased, and they're looking forward to the next one, and they want to be surprised again. And so I'm always looking in a script to surprise the audience, even on small levels. They don't have to be like, jaw-dropping surprises. There just has to be little surprises. What's behind the door? Somebody comes in from an unexpected moment, or there's a character reveal in the middle of a scene that you thought was about something completely different.
Yes.
Or, you're showing the outside of the building, before revealing what's you're hearing music and you're not sure what's going on. And then you tie the music to something surprising that's on the inside of the building. It's just all little tricks of the trade. But they're really, really important because the audience knows the 3-act structure backwards and forwards. They watch a lot of TV and a lot of movies, and they've seen it all on a certain way. But you can always find a way to sort of surprise them in the moment. They get lulled into watching something and you're kind of bored, and then, oh, wait a minute, what was that? Holy shit, did he just say that? Right. And those moments are gold. That's when the audience really engages. So in my writing, I'm constantly looking for that. I'm looking for, how can I surprise them? How can I find a way to reveal this secret of the character in a way that they didn't know? Or how can I reveal the next piece of the plot in a way that they're not expecting?
So, I feel like I've become very familiar with your work because I followed you pretty much throughout your entire career. And I finished the second season of For All Mankind about 2 months ago. And as you're talking about that, talking about surprising the audience, I can't help but think of the finale of the second season, right? And that's I'm going to do spoilers. I'm going to say it, like your decision with Tracy and Gordo at the end of that season there was a gut punch to me. And then, you know, because here I am thinking, oh, it's going to work. It's going to work. And then it doesn't. And then afterwards you're like, well, of course it wouldn't work. That would be the dumbest thing if it worked. But as a viewer of the show, you're so invested and you so think it's going to work because these characters are saying it's going to work. And then you as the writer go and say, screw you, Nick, and kill these characters. And I love it. It keeps me engaged in the show because you never know what's going to happen. And I really enjoyed that.
Well, I appreciate that. And that's a good example of what I'm talking about, because if you look at that episode closely and that particular storyline, how we even cut that sequence is a good example of burying the reveal and the surprise, because you lead the audience all the way through it's going to work. It's going to be successful. And then it's all invested on, will they get back to the hatch in time? Will they get back to the airlock in time? And we actually show them get into the airlock, which feels like success. But then we cut away really fast and we really distract you with other stuff going on. And you've got all these other things, so that part of your brain has to focus on these other storylines and the stakes of nuclear war and all that. So you've kind of forgotten about the Tracy Gordo thing. And you kind of thought that it ended happily because they got inside. And you hold the reveal all the way. You see the guy open the door first, see the expression on his face, and then show the audience what he's seeing, which is that they've died, and that preserved like the surprise as long as we possibly could.
Exactly. And you know, that's a moment where as a viewer, you go, well, there was so much more to their story that they could have continued. And then you look at their arc that led up to that point and you go, wait, actually, this is perfect for their story arc to end, because, you know, they've gone through this separation and now they've kind of found each other again at low points in their life, and they've helped rebuild each other. And it's a perfect ending for their character arc, but it's still one that hurts you in a good way as a viewer. You want that. You don't always want to be left with the story continuing on and on and on. Sometimes it's nice for it to have a finite an end.
I completely agree, and that mimics very closely the arguments that we had in the writers' room. And this idea came up, how we were going to end that story. And does Gordo die? Does Tracy die? Do they both live? And then it was, what if they both died? And it was a lot of acrimony because we love the characters, and we were very invested in them, and no one was eager to see them go. But the more we talked it through, the more it became clear, like, it was the best ending. And their story had become complete. And we even said, okay, well, let's just say for the sake of argument that they both lived. Is there a better story for them next season? Or where do they go from here? And we couldn't come up with anything that was better than this.
Right.
And so it felt right. It just took a while for us to accept it among ourselves that this was the correct ending to their story.
Right. As well, especially it's realistic within the world that you're building as well, where people are dying constantly. This is like exploration of the Americas in the 16th century, where people don't always have that happy ending. They may go and explore, but they're not going to make it back.
That's
and
right.
It brings that danger back, the danger element back. And that's very important, especially to maintain the interest of a viewer.
Right.
I'm sorry. I'm asking a lot of questions.
No.
I'm
You're good.
Yeah.
No, I just had a question about your approach, because you've written sci-fi for nearly 30 years now. Has your approach evolved at all, or are you still approaching it the same way? Because the way that we consume the product now is significantly different than when you started writing for Star Trek. And so does your approach change along with the way that your material is viewed?
To a certain extent, yeah. I mean, I mean, on a technical level, I've probably picked up a lot more tricks of the trade over time, because I've worked with a lot of great writers and spoken and been in a writer's room with really good writers who teach you things, and you learn, and and you analyze your script, and just the more you do it, the better you get at. So the rewriting over and over and over again just teaches you a lot. But there was a fairly large sea change in the way television is produced and consumed, and that is the change from episodic to serialization. Which is interesting and ironic looking back, because when I was at Star Trek, that was one of the big things we really wanted to do, because it was an episodic show, particularly Next Generation. But even on that writing staff, we wanted to play out continuing storylines, and we kept looking for ways to, could we start a sort of runner between some characters and come back and visit it. And Paramount was adamantly opposed because they wanted, and I understand the justification in the day, because they said, it was syndication and the independent stations wanted to be able to run them in whatever order they wanted to run them. And they were afraid that if viewers had missed an episode, they would check out and feel like, they couldn't keep up. And in the pre-DVR world, that was kind of true.
Right.
Like there was everybody, you had access to VHS, but that was for whatever crazy reason, we couldn't figure out how to program the fucking clocks on those things. And no one really.
Talk about NASA.
Yeah, they didn't really work the way that you wanted them to in a kind of intuitive sense. So people weren't really taping stuff to catch up. Once the DVR came along, suddenly you could make sure that you watched all the episodes of a show, and you could even say, give me the season of a certain show. Voila, suddenly you can watch serialized television fairly easily. But during the Star Trek days, as the writers, we wanted to move to a serialized form on Next Gen. And on Deep Space Nine, we were able to accomplish that, as you're seeing in the later seasons. Like there was always the desire to do more of a continuing story on Deep Space Nine, and the nature of the show itself almost compelled you to do it because the station didn't go anywhere. Mm-hmm. And Bajor was still there, and the wormhole was still there. Quark is still there. It's like the Enterprise would pull up to a planet, see a problem, solve the problem, and fly away. But Deep Space Nine didn't have that luxury. So you were almost compelled to keep some of the storylines going. And then the writers, we just kept making it denser and denser to force the show into a more of a serialized format. Mm-hmm. And then television itself shifted towards that. So the way I was trained on Next Gen, where it was episodic and it was just like single episode ideas that we would put up on a big board at the beginning of the season of, okay, we need a Picard show, we need a Worf show, we need a Data show, and you would throw up all these ideas and you could kind of mix and match, and okay, we're going to do Picard, Worf, you could checkerboard them and you could move them around if production had problems. All that kind of goes away once you're dealing with a serialized form. And it changes the writing process because now you're thinking in a much bigger time frame. These choices you make as a storyteller on this particular script now have domino effects down the line and backward. Like if I'm writing episode 3 and I change some stuff in terms of character or plot that's significant, well, the 2 previous episodes that might have already been shot are affected, right? And I have to be careful that I don't do something that screws them up. And I also have to be aware of how this is going to play for episode 4, 5, and 6. Mm-hmm. So as a writer, you suddenly have, even as just a staff member, you have to have an awareness of and be conversant with all the story that's being told, because you can make changes, and everybody does, and we're always making changes, but you have to be able to communicate that up and down the line, and you have to be sure that whatever change you do doesn't disrupt the story to a great extent, because otherwise you're going to all go back into the room and start re-breaking the story all over again. Right. So it makes you a much more integrated staff as a result.
The stuff like the writers' rooms really kind of fascinates me. What was the difference between Next Gen, DS9, For All Mankind, Outlander? What's kind of like the vibes of the different shows?
In the simplest terms, every writer's room is kind of a reflection of how the showrunner wants the room to operate. So each showrunner's individual personality kind of goes into how the room runs. Michael Piller ran a certain kind of room. Ira Bear is different. Jerry Taylor, then myself. We're all different showrunners, and the room kind of picks up on your character traits, how you like to do it, how fast you like to break a story. How much goofing around is there? How much do you all go to lunch together? Do we all eat lunch separately? A lot of it is just kind of tending toward the gestalt of the room, and how the writers come together. And certain showrunners like to do it in certain ways. Ira Bear taught me that the showrunner is the first among equals in a writer's room. And I've carried that philosophy forward. So when I run a show, I always say, I have a vision of where we're trying to go. And this is what we're trying to do. But I can be wrong. You need to be able to argue with me, and you need to, don't be afraid to tell me that this story doesn't work. Don't be afraid to come in and pitch something that's like completely out of left field. Right. And, we all argue, and everyone's point of view is kind of valid. At a certain point, the showrunner has to make a decision and say, well,
Right.
we're going to go
Right.
left and we're not going right.
Yep.
And that's fair. And as long as you've heard everybody and you've given them a chance, I feel like, I'm okay with making the decision of what we're going to do. But not every show is kind of different. And you hear various tales of various showrunners with different personalities, and they run their show how they see fit and for what works with them.
Now, do you find that the way these rooms have operated has evolved over time, though, as well? Like, could you say in the 80s, maybe they were more of an authoritarian feel to the rooms and they've loosened up over time? Or is that really, truly also dependent on the showrunner?
I think it really is dependent on the showrunner because, and some of it in the 80s and the 90s, again, so much of TV was episodic. You had a fair amount. What has really changed is there used to be a thriving market for freelance writers that would come in and pitch you ideas. Like we had, there were pitches at Star Trek literally every week where a freelance writer would come in and pitch an idea for an episode. And that was common throughout the industry because it was episodic. Because it was episodic, an outside writer could come in with whatever idea they have, and you could consider it, and you might even produce it because they didn't have to know all the intricate storylines that you were doing. Now the TV has moved so strongly into a serialized format that freelance market is really dried up. There's really no one who does that. I haven't heard a freelance pitch on a show in a very long time because there's no way they can come in and pitch me something for all mankind, because they have no idea what we're doing. So it's just not even a fair setup. Right. That's like the biggest change in terms of the writer's room. But, there's some showrunners even today that don't like to do a room at all, that prefer to work one-on-one with writers. Like they'll have a staff and the showrunner will meet with an individual writer of the staff and say, okay, you're going to do episode 4 and this is what I want it to be. And you go off and you write your story and come back and we'll talk. Then the showrunner meets with, you're going to do episode 5. And the 4 and 5 writers never actually meet and work together. They just work with the showrunner and kind of go in and out. That format frightens and confuses me.
Yeah.
But there are people.
I was getting anxiety. Just
I know.
I'm like,
but there's showrunners who do it and do it successfully. So it's every showrunner kind of does it, as they see fit.
I don't even know what show you're talking about, but I'm wondering what episode 4 and 5 look like back to back. Like how does the continuity work there? And just in that little scenario, and I'm like that. What
probably happens, and I'm just guessing, but I am pretty sure what probably happens is that the showrunner then takes a pass at the individual drafts, right?
Okay.
Which is very, very common because the showrunner usually, in my particular experience, almost always in the first season of a show, I'm rewriting almost every script because I'm figuring out the show too. And whatever we came up with in the writer's room and what you've gone off to write as an individual writer, by the time it arrives back to my desk, things have changed. I've learned other things. I've written a couple of episodes, and we're still trying to figure out what the voice of the show is, which is a very important concept. What's the voice of the show? And so through no fault of their own, they're still not hitting the voice of the show. And I don't know enough about the show myself that I can tell them specifically. Right. It's like, I just give me the script. I got to figure it out myself. And after like the first season, hopefully, in success, you figured that out, and it's easier to let them do their own notes and let them do their own drafts. And you don't do as much, or at least I don't like to do as much rewriting after the first season.
Okay. Go ahead. Go ahead. I was going to cut you off. So go for it.
No, I know. No, I wanted to ask something that's not related to your writing, but before you got your start on Next Generation, you kind of bounced around between jobs and doing. Were there any interesting jobs that you did before you really landed what your calling was? Were there any jobs where you're like, I can't believe I'm doing this right now?
I was an animal hospital receptionist. It was the first job I had in LA. And it was me working in the front with like 3 other women, which is great for me. Yeah. And it was a lot of like checking in ladies and Fluffy, and Fluffy's problems and writing down Fluffy's problems and, charging them and saying, and then sadly, we would put their pets down sometimes and they'd come out of those rooms, they'd be distraught, and I'd have to be the guy to get them to sign the paperwork. And that was, it's kind of a hard thing to do. Yeah. I was a messenger in LA in my car and driving up and down the freeway down from Glendale to Long Beach twice a day. And for people that know Southern California, they know that that's a fair distance. And those were the two strangest jobs I had that were just like, there were times ago, I remember going home saying, how did I end up here? What, is this my life? Is this what I'm going to be?
Knowing that you've worked in an animal hospital and now looking back at your body of work, there's not a lot of animals in your body of work. So clearly that's
there's not a lot of animals.
Yeah,
that's
right. Clearly scarred you to an extent.
Well, I'll piggyback off the writing topic. You like music? Can I assume you like music?
Yeah.
What are you listening to? What's your go-to music? Band?
I kind of go through periods where I'll suddenly get obsessed with, rock that was done in Southeast Asia during the 60s and the 70s was a recent period I was like discovered and got fascinated with. Right now I'm going through my Grateful Dead phase.
Okay.
Which was,
very nice.
it was a band I never knew anything about and had no interest in. And then I literally was reading this long article that I happened on. I think I'm not sure. I think it was in Esquire. This is about a year or two ago. And it was this long article about this underground sort of movement there where they used to trade tapes, like physical reel-to-reel tapes that were bootleg tapes, but the Dead let you record their concerts. So they're kind of famous for it. And there was this whole like underground society of people trading these tapes through the mail, like in the 70s and into the 80s. And it was such a fascinating read. It just made me go, I should listen to this music, and this is kind of crazy. And I found like the Internet Archive has like all these concerts, and I started just listening to entire concerts, instead of like, because I'd heard their songs obviously, and I tried to listen to an album here and there, and I was like, I just don't get it. And it wasn't until I sat down and started listening to entire concerts that I was like, started to become really taken with them, and started to become like fascinated with the history of the band. And so I'm in my Grateful Dead period.
Right. Nice.
Yeah, that tape trading community tradition still kind of continues. It started with the Dead, and then it continued through Fish and Dave Matthews Band, and even some even more current artists still do like digital taping, and they'll just post it to the internet, and they
is that right?
They trade that way. So they were pioneers in that way, and that tradition is still carried on. I mean, there are some bands that they will allow you to carry this big equipment in to tape their shows.
It's pretty amazing. I went to one Grateful Dead concert with a girlfriend right around the time that I sold that first Trek script. And she was a fan, and she was just, oh, let's go. And I remember looking down and seeing in front of the stage all this equipment.
Yeah.
It was all these mics and tape decks. And I was like, what is all that? She's like, oh, that's just fans. They let the fans come in and do it. And that kind of blew my mind at the time. Going, they let the fans come in and tape their concerts. Like, what is this?
I just went to a Tool concert. Actually, Joe and I did. And you took your cell phone out. They were on top of you saying, put that away.
Yeah. I'm more used to that.
The other end. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's almost like the equivalent of going into a movie theater and taping the movie. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, to an extent. But it's worked for Grateful Dead. Clearly, it's kept them going.
They got some loyal fans.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Yeah. All right. So I have one last question for you. Then I know you have a big one that's on that board there, right?
Yep.
And then, so my question for you actually, it goes about, I've looked at some of the bodies of work that you had in the past, and I've looked at some of the scripts that you've written that didn't make it to screen for one reason or another. What's one of the stories that you've had, one of the stories you've developed that you wish could have made it to television?
Well, Narain Shankar and I wrote a pilot for the Wild Wild West that we wanted to reboot. That I really miss, because Wild Wild West was one of those other childhood shows that I was obsessed with as a kid. James T. West, James T. Kirk. And I was really looking forward to doing it, and it was one of those stories where, oh, we love it, we're going to do it, it's a big thing, and then it was, well, no, we don't want to do a Western. It's like, oh shit. You could have said that at the beginning of this process. It saved us all a lot of time and heartache. So that's the big one that got away from me.
Gotcha. Okay.
We asked this question to everybody. You can go ahead and ask it. We just had Will Wheaton on just like 3 weeks ago or something like that. And we love pizza. We love pizza. So
what are your toppings? What do you like pizza? Like, what are your go-to toppings? What when you go out for pizza, what are you
looking
excited
for?
to get?
What are you
looking
craving?
for?
Oh, I love pizza, and I tend towards a New York thin crust and sort of class. I'm very simple toppings: sausage, mushroom, and olive is my go-to.
Okay, all right. Well, and I've heard from multiple people. Armin told us that Bob Picardo makes the most amazing pizza. So if you ever get in touch with Bob Picardo, have his pizza. From what I've heard,
I will.
Yeah.
I'll hit him up for that.
Yeah.
He's gonna have multiple people at his doorstep.
Like, why are they all asking me about the pizza?
Solely from our show?
Yeah.
We heard on Keeping Up with the
That's right.
Cardassians that you make the best pizza.
Yeah, he swore. Armin talked about it for 15 minutes about
Really?
Bob's pizza.
Yeah.
I'm not. Yeah. I wish I was joking. I'm not.
You recently signed a deal with Disney, didn't you?
Yes, I'm at the 20th Century, which is part of Disney now. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember either I heard it or I read it that you were a big Disney person when you were young as well.
Particularly Disneyland.
Okay.
I'm a huge aficionado of the original park in Anaheim. I grew up in a small town called Chowchilla, which is about almost dead center of the state of California. And our family vacation every year was to drive down to Anaheim and spend like 3 or 4 days at the park. And it was just one of those things in my childhood I loved. And I had the big color map of the park. And in between visits, I would plot out what we were going to do. And I wrote up, made up stories about being a Disneyland secret agent and, all kinds of flights of fancy.
Yeah.
And then I started getting really interested in the backstory of the park and how it was created and the stories behind the attractions and the Imagineers and all that. So part of the attraction for me to go work for Disney was the chance to sort of get to play with some of that IP and to really sort of dig into to Disneyland in particular. But the rest of the Disney library is something that was certainly part of my childhood growing up, and it still occupies a very special space for me.
Excellent.
Who knows? Maybe someday we'll see a Star Wars by Ronald Moore, huh?
That'd be fun. It'd be fun to, I did work on. I got to work with George briefly on the Star Wars live action series that didn't happen, so that was fun.
Yeah.
that was a tale.
And that was going to be underground, if I recall, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Underworld.
That's correct. Yeah. And then Disney had to go and buy it. But we like Disney.
Yeah.
Now it's come full circle, and maybe you can reapproach.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
You never know. It's all part of the family.
It's all part of the family. Right. Exactly. I lied. I do have one quick final question. I consider it a joke question personally, but I got to take the shot for my friend. She asked if she could get Sam's number. Is that possible? No. Okay.
Oh, sure. I was going to put it on Twitter anyway. So
nice.
Okay, cool. I'll let her know to look for that.
Yeah.
Just look for that.
No. I had many more questions, but we know we were limited on our time, so we want to respect your time. So anything else, gentlemen?
No, I just appreciate coming on. I've been an admirer for years and years and years, and thank you for taking the time. This has been an honor.
Yes.
I've been an admirer for months and months.
Yes. So,
well, I appreciate that, and happy to do it, and happy to come back sometime.
All right.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thanks, Ron. Have a great rest of the day, and good luck to you.
Thank you.
All right.
Take
Bye
care.
now.
Take care.
Nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you.
And we're done.
How cool is that?
What's up with that?
No.
What's up with that?
What's up?
What was that SNL skit?
SNL.
That went on way too long?
No.
Yes.
That's a great skit.
Every skit with him goes on way too long.
That's a great skit, though. In an era of SNL where there's not a lot of recurring skits that get a lot of laughs, that's a great skit.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Okay, you got me there. What's up?
So Ronald D. Moore.
So Ronald D. Moore.
We talk. No.
He's a plain
you'll
pizza
notice
eater.
He is, but you'll notice a distinct lack of SNL talk in that interview.
Which is very odd considering we came in hot with SNL talk.
I had to scratch off all my SNL questions. We ran out of time.
Yeah. But it was a good time. We had a blast. It was joy filled. I cried a little bit.
I could honestly, I'm not familiar with all of his work, obviously, but I could listen to him talk shop all day. Like I was enamored.
That's why I wanted to keep on asking those questions.
Yeah, I was like intrigued. Like he had me hook, line, and sinker, like on bated breath with all of the talk about the writing process and the differences between shows and differences between eras of writing. Especially, for me, when he was talking about the difference in eras of television, because we've talked about that a number of times on the show.
Well, and just I never thought about how for freelance scriptwriters that can't exist anymore.
No,
that was a really interesting point.
It was.
You could write a great script and show up to them, and they're like, "Yeah, we killed that character, but you just haven't seen it yet because you're 6 months behind."
We're writing serialized television as opposed to episodic, and you need sort of more episodes.
One of the things I wanted to ask him was more about like, what did you want to serialize in TNG? I wanted to know that.
Oh,
that was interesting when he said that he had some things he wanted to do.
What storyline could have been you would have liked to fleshed out in Next Generation?
Take a bit of time and kind of develop right.
So what I also wanted to ask him is what was his favorite arc overall in all of the shows he's made?
Yeah.
Because there's a favorite. There's like a baby. Like I love this arc. This was my thing that I'd like to know that. I also liked his answer for Kira in Battlestar Galactica because I could absolutely see her in Battlestar Galactica. She would fit that very well. She actually was in Battlestar Galactica. Nana Visitor.
Oh, she was?
Yeah. Just a 1-episode spot in the 4th season. She was great.
Interesting. As a Mirror Universe episode?
Was she the attendant?
Mirror Universe, yeah. Yeah, the attendant. So, anyways, that was fun. And you guys, we're going to keep trying to get interviews because...
Throw some suggestions our way and then tag them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tag those people. Say, you should be on this show. Because they've talked to Ronald D more. They've talked with other people. In fact, Hillary just liked my tweet just now on the Twitter about Ronald D. Moore.
There you go.
Yeah. So, hey. Awesome.
You're already spreading the word.
The word.
In real time.
In real time.
I know.
Okay. So,
all right.
Anyways.
Let us know what you think. You can let us know on Twitter, at Cardassians Pod. Instagram, keeping_up_Cardassians.
That's true.
Go to Facebook. You can. Where else? We have a MySpace. If you're logging out,
don't go to MySpace.
If you're logging out with dial-up, you can go to MySpace.
I'd rather them go to Patreon because we have a $2, $5, and $10 tier. We send you a nice letter. $5, we give you some exclusive content on the Patreon, and $10, you get Q&As with us. So you should do it.
And if we didn't ask what you wanted, you can yell at us on the Q&A.
Yeah, you could say, listen, pricks, do better.
Thank you. Plural.
Yeah.
Plural.
I did. I was looking at YouTube. And listen, pricks.
Our newest way to contact.
Yes. And you can get out a more fleshed out thought process.
We'll put your phone calls on air.
Yeah.
You can reach us by phone number.
734-494-0980. 734-494-0980.
Leave us a message.
Yeah. Let us know what you think of the show. Any of the interviews we've done.
Yeah. Suggestions for DS9 ends.
Yeah. Or your favorite episodes of DS9, or favorite characters. Anything you want.
Or how great is Jason Momoa?
Or how little Nick likes fun.
Yeah, exactly.
I like the band Fun.
Let us know if you're in any cults, like Nick is.
Yeah. Or if you're in denial.
Let me know if you're in a cult. I'll come visit you. I'll let you know if you qualify for cult status.
That's true.
All right. This was Nick.
This is Rob.
This is Joe.
Bye.